kick off any second. And so from this point forward, we are recording this call. So this call will be taken as is. It'll be then turned into a YouTube presentation, thanks to Liz and the team at Doug. And so it'll get posted as is. So at this point, if you don't want your camera on, probably should have said this before I flipped the switch, but if you don't want your camera on or anything like that, please turn it off, and then you're good, because we are recording moving forward. And so in terms of next piece, just some housekeeping items. If you're speaking, if you have a question, by all means, please feel free to chime in. As I mentioned earlier, before we started recording, we try to be super casual, right? This is about you. This is about user group interaction. The whole point is that we are talking together and interacting. We're going to turn the torch over to Liz and Susana here shortly to do their spiels and presentations. So during that, please use the chat if you can, but if you have items that you'd like to share, use the raise hand feature. We'll be sure to call on you. I'm going to keep an eye on that throughout. Please do use the chat to interact with each other, share your LinkedIn profiles. Again, the entire intent here is that you are interacting with each other and communicating. And we're going to talk in a minute about upcoming events, and we're getting into conference season. If any of you are going to any of the conferences that are coming up, now's a great opportunity to kind of get to know some people who might be there. And then it gives you an on-the-ground buddy when you get there that you can meet face-to-face, which is really cool. Of course, it goes without saying, but I would not be a good host if I didn't call out the bottom point. Please be respectful at all times. It's entirely likely that we're going to have things come up and discussion points that we may have differing opinions on. We encourage that. We want that to happen because we want to share perspectives from all different angles. But please, it's okay if we disagree or agree to disagree, and that's fine. Again, goes without saying, but I want to make sure I call it out. So we're going to do a Doug intro in just a couple of minutes, and then we're going to turn it over to Susana to talk about customer insights and marketing. I've already beat this one up a little bit, but the next slide is going to talk about user groups are all about connection. So when you join this, when we do the open forum networking at the beginning of the call, if I click that, it'll move. When we do it at the beginning of the call, the whole intent is to get to know each other. So please feel comfortable. I know it can be a little overwhelming, and sometimes maybe you're eating and things like that. Totally get it. There's no pressure, but please know that I, as one, I can say I've been coming to these for a very long time. I have very, very close friends, people I would refer to as friends, literally around the world now, because of interacting at groups like this, whether it's in person or virtual. So if you're new in the space and you're just getting started and you're trying to make some connections, keep attending these kinds of things. Put your info out there. Use the chat. Get to know people. We all live in the fast-paced world of, hey, we got to move on things, and sometimes you run into stuff that you need help on, and that's totally okay. And the connections you make here are great resources for you to turn to. I would say that I have never met a person who comes to a user group session that would be upset, offended, or wouldn't respond if somebody from that group reached out and said, hey, so-and-so, you talked about this, and I'm kind of stuck and I need some help. I think everybody I've ever met would be like, oh my God, let's jump on a call and let's get together and or here's my response, I'm happy to help, or here's some resources or other people to introduce you to. So please leverage this for what it's worth, because the idea here is connection and making sure that you have options and resources available to you as you need. Next item, we've already talked about it, or summer stories. So we always start these calls with a quick overview of some kind of topic, because it's the first one back. We did summer stories, like, hey, what did you do this summer? Next time we'll probably do something like, what's the biggest feature that your favorite feature of Dynamics 365 and in the CRM world. I'm looking back at some of the past ones. What's your favorite feature? How did you start on the application? What's your most used resource, right? Where do you go for answers? Is it Learn? Is it somebody specific in the community, somebody's blog? So the idea here is foster some conversation about the resources that people use, or whatever the topic may be. So when you join the calls, always expect the first 15 or so minutes to focus on that, and please chime in as you see fit. Upcoming items. So on October 12th, we're still nailing down the date and the participants. I do a running series with Heidi Newhauser and Kylie Kaiser. If you're familiar with anything in the dynamic space, Power Platform stuff, you probably have heard of them. They are, the three of us do what we call power tips. So we do short videos every other Friday that just focus on neat things that are coming up in the release waves, right? So Microsoft announces release wave updates twice a year. So we zone in on those release waves and we talk about features. So the reason I explained that to you, the co-pilot session is the three of us are going to do an overview. It just might not be the three of us. It might actually be just one of us or two of us. And so that's going to focus on Copilot. If you haven't heard of Copilot, I would encourage you to crawl out from the rock in which you live, because it's everywhere, right? It's in every application now. It's everywhere. So if you're not familiar with it, do some reading, because it's extremely powerful. And so we're going to highlight some of the key features and functions that exist in that application. And then on November 9th, as you see, we have a group from, I forget the name of the organization, but they're going to come out and speak about field service and some of the cool features and functions, things that are evolving in that space. And so we're excited about that one. Envision, I think it's Envision is the company. You'll see a slide on, and I know these aren't hot links, so you can't click them on screen, but if you want one of them, please let me know and I'll copy them out while the presentation is going on. These are all other organizations and user group environments that exist out there in Canada that we know of. We could be wrong. Some of these may no longer exist. Some of them, there may be other ones that we don't know, so we're happy to add to the list. But the idea here is, if you see something in your locale and you'd like to see if they're doing anything in person or something like that, let us know. And again, you can find this really just by searching do a web search for Microsoft Dynamics 365 or Power Platform user groups, and you'll see some links to the Microsoft supported environment that connects all those things together. Almost done, and then I'm going to hand it over to Liz. We are excited to welcome Susana today. So Susana is going to talk us through marketing and customer insights. So we're going to hand it over to her in just a couple minutes. But before we do, Liz, why don't I hand it over to you? Liz Allen is here from the DUG group, so the Dynamics user group, and she's here to share some of the exciting things that are coming up in the realm of DUG.
Thank you very much, Malcolm. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this wonderful Canadian National CRM user group. My name is Liz Hallen. I'm the VP here at Dynamics User Group, or as we like to call it, DUG. I am here to welcome you and to say thank you for coming and joining, and everything that Welcome just said about user groups in terms of how you leverage the networking and how it can make you better in your career and help you with issues and problems is 1000% true. I've been in this community space for over 23 years, and I will tell you, I've seen many, many success stories. And so Dynamics User Group is really here to help foster ensuring that we're making those connections and having events and platforms and services available to you so that you can make some fantastic connections and really grow your own personal community, as well as grow in your career. So we do offer a free membership. It's a free membership for an individual because we truly believe that community should take you through your whole career journey. We focus on all of the Dynamics 365 products, Dynamics GP, as well as the Power Platform. So we cover all of those different product lines. We have been around for quite a long time, actually since 1995, but we started as an online discussion forum. And only over the last 3 years have we had full-time staff on board and really increased the number of services and platforms and things that we offer. And so we've grown now to over 42,000 community members worldwide. It's fantastic. We're having a blast. So in addition to DUG meetups, like what we're all here joining together today to execute on, we do have other programs as well. One you may know us fairly well for, which is the DynamicsCon events. So we are the host of the DynamicsCon events. We've been holding both virtual and in-person DynamicsCons. The next DynamicsCon virtual event, which many of you hopefully have participated in. If you haven't, I hope that you will. Our next one won't be until November of 2024, so you're going to have to wait a little bit. But that one is really, really fun to bring our whole global community together. And we do offer session submissions as well as community voting because we want you guys to be very active in participating in the content that's provided. I'm going to talk about DynamicsCon Live here in just a little bit. Before I do that, we are also started a webinar program this year, which is free webinars that are offered on a monthly basis. We cover, it's great product education by experts in our community. We do this in conjunction with MS Dynamics World. We still have those online discussion forums, so if you have a quick question and you're really not sure who to go to, that's a great resource as well. As Malcolm mentioned, this recording, as well as about 700 other webinars and past DynamicsCon virtual recordings on product topics and education, are available on our YouTube channel, so I encourage you to subscribe to that. And we do also have programs for our partners and ISVs in the community too. All of our partners and ISVs are a huge part of our community. We do have some featured in our Team Up program, so if you're looking for a solution for something specific, I encourage you to check them out. For our American folks, or for the Canadians that are willing to do a little bit of travel, we're having a larger regional event in Atlanta in November. Still more information to come on that. We will have CE CRM focused content there, as well as some F&O or finance and supply chain, whatever Microsoft is calling it these days. And last but not least, our DynamicsCon Live event will be hosted in beautiful Denver, Colorado, where I was just telling you guys I got to check off one of my bucket list concerts at recently. We will be there May 13th through the 16th next year at the beautiful Marriott Denver Tech Center. And I do have this promo code here for you. We do have early bird pricing right now through the end of October. So you can use this coupon to get $100 off of that early bird rate as well. I'll drop some links in the chat for you all in case you have questions or want to learn more about it. I would love to chat with you. And again, thank you so much for being here and being part of community. We are excited to have you here.
It's exciting to see that level of growth. It's the number every time Liz comes out, the number's a little bit bigger than it was before. So it's cool to see that expanding ever more, which is really exciting. So, and Denver is probably one of my favorite cities, quite literally. So I'm going to have to talk to Jeff, our owner here at C5, and get him to try and loop me into that event, because that'll be a lot of fun. I wanted to respond. So I sent a quick response to one of the requests for the Power Platform user group and the Microsoft user groups. I put the links there. Was it John? Somebody asked about, John asked about Copilot being released to GA in the market, Canadian market. So yeah, sort of, because it's just so far reaching. So one quick example of that, Viva Sales was a tool that Microsoft was pumping pretty hard, and it's now called Dynamics, Copilot for Sales, or Sales Copilot, or something like that. To Liz's point, who knows what they're calling anything anymore? But they, so they're rolling out components of it. And so the release wave documentation, if you're not familiar with that, I'll put the links up once we get rolling here. But the release wave is a great place to look, because that's where they really start to break down all of the levels of features that are coming and their associated dates. So there's things literally all over the map, which is why I'm giving you a long-winded answer. Some things are in public preview right now. Some things are GA. Some things won't be public preview for a month or two. It's kind of all over the map. So there are components of it. I'll put those links up here shortly. So that is awesome. So Liz, thank you so much for the overview and great insight. Again, super excited to see Doug growing. And without further ado, I would love to turn it over to Susana, who's going to talk to us about some of the customer insights and marketing items. So Susana, over to you to take it away.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Hello, hello. I am Susana Ramos. I serve as our Director of Marketing Services here at Coffee and Done. I lead our managed services practice for the organization. So that's primarily focused on all things after go live. So user adoption, training, campaign development and execution, anything that helps teams make the most of their investment in Dynamics 365 products. Now that's just a sliver of what Coffee and Done does. So I'll do a very quick run through of Coffee and Done, and then we'll jump right in. We are a connected experience partner. We provide advisory, technology, and operations services. Our goal is simple. we're just looking to help organizations leverage Dynamics 365 Power Platform technology to solve their CE issues. It really is that simple. We help companies large and small, so major league sports teams to improve ticket sales, nonprofits to increase membership, global organizations with multiple divisions, helping them to align their sales and marketing teams so that they can leverage the technology in a meaningful way to improve things like retention. That's just a little bit of what Coffee and Done offers. I'll leave just the rest of it on there. You can quickly read a little bit more about us. Jumping right in, I thought it would be helpful just first to talk about the evolution of marketing, which is our anchor. Talk about marketing before we actually get into the platform itself. So brands are in a constant state of transformation, and they're experiencing a lot of change at pretty unprecedented levels. When we see there's a stat from MediaSense, the first one here, that shows just about 1 in 10 of global marketing leaders feel like they've got it right, which means everybody else feels less confident when it comes to their digital transformation journey. Marketers' top challenges, these may not feel like big surprises here, but the ability to engage with customers in real time, that's one we're going to get a little bit more into as we start talking about real-time marketing in customer journeys, customer insights journeys. That's a mouthful. That's going to be fun to repeat throughout. But engaging those customers in real time, innovation, and then just being able to build that end-to-end customer journey. These are the things that are continuing to plague marketers today. When it comes to people, the resource allocations, they're pretty stable year over year, but that budget is shrinking. And what that really means is that they're looking for additional efficiencies across all major investments. Now, I think the next one is a really good segue as we start to get a little bit more into the platform, but we're also seeing an increase in investments in marketing technology. So I think the CMO Council was like around 70% of folks that are a part of that council are focusing more of their investments in marketing technology. So when we talk about this constant transformation and the pace in which that's happening, look, for 9 out of 10 folks, that's still a struggle. And that means the pace of innovation, changing customer behavior, and those shifts in resourcing. So customer expectations, they're starting to change those digital strategies. That means that organizations are finding it more difficult to manage or integrate their tech stack, their data, digital channels. And the same thing applies to their resources. So resources are having to become more analytic in nature, more technical, and they're being challenged by those expanding roles, responsibilities, even just expectations of the business. It's a lot of change, but leading organizations see one competitive advantage, and that's the ability to create that connected experience for their customers across channels and interactions. It requires the pretty familiar trifecta of people, process, and technology. And that last one is the perfect segue into the evolution of the marketing solution for Dynamics. Now, for those of you who are not familiar, I'll give you some backstory. Starting in 2012, Microsoft acquired Marketing Pilot. For those of you who were familiar with it when they rebranded it as Microsoft Dynamics Marketing, you know that this was pretty focused on marketing resource management with a little bit of marketing automation functionality. But if we fast forward to 2018, early on, Microsoft sunsets MDM, reemerges with a new product. That's Dynamics 365 for marketing. So I'm sure you're already seeing a pattern in the changes in names, which is not a surprise to anyone who was listening earlier on the call, yeah? Now with Dynamics 365 for marketing, we started to see things like more event management functionality and the like, but it was still primarily focused on outbound marketing communication. So this kind of wide net strategy where we're targeting this large audience that may or may not be interested in a given product or service is kind of the kitchen sink effect, right? And then we're just using that to send out fairly generic communication. Fast forward a little bit to 2021. And Microsoft announces this new set of features called real-time marketing. Now, I use the term announce intentionally, right? Because like with any product, I'm sure folks are familiar, that is the start, but there is quite the evolution that happens right after. So as we're getting into 2022, 2023, we're starting to see a pretty significant acceleration when it comes to real-time marketing, starting to get a lot closer to feature parity when it comes to RTM versus outbound. But the goal here with real time is to be able to create this more kind of in the moment, moments-based approach to messaging. So big development effort on behalf of Microsoft, and to see that level of investment continued is really promising. But I think the goal here is for us to be able to leverage the platform to get away from this spray and pray type of marketing and move to a more tailored, targeted, moments-based approach to that messaging. Now, I mentioned that outbound and real time are two separate areas of the system, and they are both active right now, with one exception. So those who do not have customer insights today but look to get it in the future, you're only going to see real-time marketing, and we're going to focus a little bit more on that throughout the rest of the conversation. But the goal here was for those who were using outbound to not be disrupted while they made that kind of transition over into where, quite frankly, that's where most of the investment was, which is in real-time marketing. Now, I mentioned before, we have organizations that are constantly struggling with a way to be able to integrate a lot of the data that they have. That data ecosystem, as much as we would love for Dynamics to be the single source of truth, I think realistically, knowing that you have your CMSs, your POSs, all of these external systems that house what could be really critical data that can be used and leveraged to be able to create those more targeted communications. It sounds like Microsoft has really stepped up to the plate here and seen how we can potentially satisfy that need. So at the beginning of the month, you'll see that there is a rebrand. They have married the journeys and data, or what we would have known before as customer insights and marketing, under one umbrella, and that becomes customer insights. This is, I think, going to become a more robust system that really enables organizations to be able to create these more personalized, connected buying experiences. Again, being able to leverage data beyond what's already been captured in Dynamics, being able to leverage that data, being able to visualize that data in a more unified way. So a really great evolution that we're seeing of the product. That's not without its nuances, which we're definitely going to get into here in a second. But yeah, just a quick kind of jot down memory lane as it relates to the product. For those of you who are not as familiar with CI journeys, just a quick overview of what is really a robust application. It's got lots of tools. The idea of multi-channel, journey orchestration, the goal here is just to be able to target and attract the right prospects. And so you'll see some functionality that supports that. There's lead nurturing capabilities, and that gives insights needed to be able to prioritize those leads, be able to create a more smoother transition as sales becomes more involved and starts to lead parts of the lead process. Event management, so that's where you're starting to see a lot of those tools that help, from registration, attendance tracking, QR codes for in-person, and obviously, as we saw with the pandemic, the need for virtual events. And so that's where the Teams integration with marketing comes into play. From an insights and reporting perspective, I mentioned, again, we're now able to visualize a lot more data on both the journeys and the data side. And so we are really starting to see what I think was positioned previously as a truly holistic view of our customers and prospects. That is, I'll show you here in a second, some of the unified profiles in both areas. We're also seeing new functionality around marketing effectiveness dashboards where you can kind of customize these milestones, and they will allow you to kind of better monitor the success of your marketing efforts at those specific milestones. And then again, all of this sits on unified platform, which I think the team is pretty familiar with at this point. But that means that there's a lot of ready-built integration, obviously, across the Dynamics 365 suite. Finally, AI. Now, I recognize that this is like a big buzzword, and it's something that's increasingly top of mind. Some of this was already available in CI journeys, so things like the spam checker. We are seeing the introduction of Copilot as well. Full disclosure, this is still a work in progress. And so while it's come a long way, we're still continuing to see some refinement. But for CI journeys, you're going to see that in a couple of areas. There's natural language queries, so this helps you kind of create those audiences or segments with just a couple of pieces of criteria. And then content brainstorming, and that really allows you to just kind of set a foundation for messaging, obviously with some refinement to ensure that it really meets your brand voice. There is, I just mentioned at the very bottom right there, there's journey orchestration for Copilot that is coming. That's coming later this fall, along with some smart scheduling as well. But this is kind of at a glance what you can expect to see in the tool. It's robust, but it's also scalable. So, we typically will recommend a kind of crawl, walk, run approach where customers are just kind of laying the foundation using some of the core marketing functionality that we're seeing here, and then they can, start to add additional capabilities as they continue to mature in their digital journey. I'll pause here for a second. Any questions on kind of the overview of customer insights journeys?
What about the licensing for that? Because up until now, they've been two separate licenses. For like even just customer engagement. So is it all combined in one big license then going forward?
It is, yeah. So it is one SKU. You can bundle or do separate. Thomas, I don't know if you're on, if you want to give a little bit more insight on that, but the short answer is yes, you do have the ability to bundle now.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Susana. Hi, everybody. My name is Thomas Manders, also with Coffee and Done. Susana's right. What used to be sort of two separate SKUs that were each sort of priced similarly based on contact volumes or customer profile volumes. Those two are still available as such, but now there is a bundle with the two products together, and kind of in rough terms, there's about a 40% discount when you bundle the two. So just for argument's sake, in US dollars, what used to be $1,500 for each is now $1,700 for both. That's for the core applications. There are still some additional add-ons, things like additional contact volumes, some areas where you need things like Power Apps and so forth, Power Pages, for instance, for portals. So, but the base product is a pretty nice discount, and I think a good value certainly for anybody who's considering CI or marketing. There's really almost no reason not to get both.
Thanks, Thomas.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Just a quick question on that. As I understand, there's a bit of a grace period for existing customers for licensing. Is that correct? Do you know any details on that?
Yes, I think the idea is you'll be able to continue your current licensing package. If you're already on a multi-year license, I think there's an ability to include the bundle or sort of quote upgrade to the bundle. As Susana mentioned, one thing that's happening within Dynamics CI Journeys, which is the marketing app, is that it will no longer ship with the outbound marketing at some point. So you won't lose the outbound marketing if you have it today, but it won't come with the new SKU. new product.
Got it.
And so, I think clearly they're trying to move everything to real-time marketing, which makes sense. Admittedly, had not been at parity the last year and a half, but it's pretty much there now with a very few exceptions.
Got it. Awesome. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Thomas. So the goal here, like I said, a more sophisticated approach that, if done right, can empower marketers to run more data-driven campaigns, be able to, I think going back to that evolution that I mentioned earlier as it relates to people and how that's kind of keeping up with the pace of change in marketing as a whole. This is something that requires a new discipline, right? So it does require traditional marketers to be a little bit more technical and analytic in nature. And with that, obviously, comes the need for a fair amount of training to really make sure that you're making the most of the platform. Now, I talked about, outbound and real time. Here's a quick and dirty table of the features. You'll see outbound features in one column. Next to it, the real time versions of those features. And then obviously with some additional enhancements, as well as where today, anyway, we're seeing shared features between the two areas. I've also called out just a few, areas in the green X's, which I think are worth highlighting, where we're seeing not just a real-time version of the feature, but in some cases, some pretty cool enhancements. So journeys, for example, you're getting that channel optimization that I mentioned. So again, we're talking about that multi-channel journey orchestration. So in lieu of really just focusing on emails or bringing in SMS, but having to create a custom channel to do so, there's some native integrations with SMS. I'll talk about that here in a second, but now you can actually use SMS, leverage even push notifications, and along with email, the system can help best determine the best method to actually send that communication. Now, again, we're still seeing a little bit of refinement on that in some of our continued testing, but I think it'll be really powerful because it again goes back to this need to be able to send out the messaging in the way that makes the most sense for each individual at a given moment in time, in the way that they're going to best receive that message. Attribute branching is, I think, another example. So within journeys in outbound today, you are mostly focused on branching that's based off of engagement. So if they clicked a certain link, then we're going to send them down this track. That's actually taken a step further in real time. So you're able to now branch based off of attributes. So if we want to do it based off of geo or job title or the like, so it really increases some of the flexibility in terms of how you're defining the next best action for a given individual. There's also triggers rather. And I think triggers they do require a little bit of a shift in mindset. We're used to these point in time audiences that we're curating based off of whichever criteria. But again, it's point in time. And so Journeys allows a couple of things, and we'll get into a little bit more on this. But again, it allows you to be able to send out those at what we would call kind of a signature moment. So whether that's when they just enter the system or when a certain event occurs or a particular behavior occurs, or even an internal action in the system. So when a contact is created or a lead is updated or the like, right? So the goal here is to be able to create these more like individualized kind of tracks in lieu of just having these point in time audiences. And it just helps you move away from that kind of batch and blast approach. Emails. So a lot of opportunity for personalization here. And again, I'm going to get a little bit more into this in a second, but there's a lot of opportunity there. Now that could be at the highest level with like brand profiles, which is it's kind of a mix of an evolution of the content settings in outbound, but with some additional features. But also there's just greater personalization, particularly in the ability to create dynamic content based off of one-to-many relationships, which is a big departure from what you're able to do in outbound today. The Preference Center. Now, we do have an upcoming webinar on leveraging Dynamics 365 for consent management. It definitely warrants its own discussion. But the Preference Center is part of a more flexible, more modern, I'd say, consent model that allows for businesses that are doing, or organizations that are doing business in multiple regions. So if you are focused in Canada, but you also do business in the EU, being able to have a little bit of flexibility that allows you to ensure compliance across those different regions. The Preference Center is something that can help do that. It can also help with capturing and managing consent related to not just email, but SMS as well. And then finally, analytics. So like I said, we have the marketing effectiveness dashboard is one, but we're also just starting to see more analytics that are native within the product. Now, I don't necessarily think that that takes away from the need to have more of a macro level in Power BI, but there is a little bit more, the dashboards I think are becoming a little bit more useful in CI journeys, where we're able to better understand some of the performance that's happening at the journey level, and just better kind of determine the effectiveness of those efforts than previously. So just a few call outs when we're kind of comparing the two work areas before we get into some benefits and highlights. Questions on the comparison between the two? All right, easy enough. All right, let's jump in and talk about some benefits and highlights. So I've called out 5 areas. There are more, but I want to focus on these 5 for the purposes of today. The first is that 360-degree view of the customer. I know this is something that we've heard a lot, and even as Microsoft positions the product. I'm going to show you an example here where we're kind of seeing it really being taken to the next level, especially now as we're marrying both customer insights, data, and journeys. But to be able to have that unified timeline that has customer activity, transactional data, even some of the intelligence from enriching some of that data really does enable a more holistic view of your customers. This allows us to be able to leverage beyond just behavioral insights for more of that targeted real-time communication. The moments-based nurture. So having these trigger-based journeys, it makes it easier to start sending those out in real time, whether you're trying to drive interest, demand. It just makes it easier to make it more data driven, to be able to maximize engagement as opposed to just that kind of kitchen sink effect. Personalization, which I know I've talked a lot about, but you've got some advanced audience targeting, some content automation tools around content ideas, and then of course that conditional content that I talked about. The other departure that I think is really helpful in real time is now you have the ability to directly communicate with leads. So those of you who are familiar with marketing historically know that you had to associate leads to contacts in order for you to be able to send information or leverage that data. Now, in real time, they can become 2 distinctly different audiences, which I think opens up a lot of opportunity because some of the critical data that's being captured as leads are entering the system. I talked a little bit about consent management here, but again, having those flexible, restrictive, non-restrictive models to ensure compliance across the board. And then finally, Copilot, which I've talked about. And again, the journeys and smart scheduling, they're not available today. They are slated to be available later in the year. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about each of those. So starting with the unified profile. So I'm sure everyone here is familiar with the contact table. So obviously having the ability, and this is maybe about a year old, the ability to have the timeline, that unified timeline that actually shows the activity. But now we're starting to see it be taken a step further where we can actually see the communication directly within the timeline. So not just that the interaction occurred, but actually see the communication that was sent to the individual. It is on the roadmap, but not yet released, where you'll actually be able to see the personalization as well. So if you had a specific, a name or a company or wherever you have that personalization, you'll be able to see exactly what it said. You do still have the Insights tab if you wanted to get a more in-depth view of some of that communication, and that's both for real time and outbound. But I think this is where we start to take it to the next level. It's customer insights. So again, I mentioned you have this data that lives in all of these disparate systems. There's an opportunity to centralize and then visualize that data using CI profiles. And so in addition to things like your activities and some of the attributes related to an individual or an account, if you're looking to take a more B2B approach, you also have a lot of the intelligence that can be brought in thanks to things like data enrichment. So if we needed to be able to better understand churn risk, if we needed to be able to better understand some of the transactional data that's happening, all of that is being pulled into the CI profile, which can then be leveraged to create segments that can be used in your journeys. So again, a lot of more opportunity to engage customers, regardless of where that data is being captured. If we jump into personalization, so all right, let's say, for example, you have a campaign. It's for volunteers and donors, and it includes the newsletter here. We want to ensure that only the donors, not the volunteers, are receiving an invite to an upcoming event. Now, historically, you would have had to either create a separate email and or a separate swim lane in your journey. That's been consolidated now. So instead of having to create those two separate emails, you can use something like segment membership here to be able to conditionally show that content based off of that criteria. So if they are an active donor, we're going to show them that, and then we'll see the difference in the preview. Another call out here is the conditions and lists. And so that was, I mentioned before, around the ability to use dynamic content based on those one-to-many relationships. So historically in outbound, this is where something like the for each loops would have come in, where you had to go into the code, build out the logic. Now, Microsoft's taken away the need for a lot of that with conditions and lists. So let's say volunteers, you've got a volunteer re-engagement campaign, you want to include the name of, let's say, a previous event that the volunteer participated in order to drive maximum engagement. So in this case, the volunteer may have participated in multiple events. That means there's a one-to-many relationship between the volunteer and their event attendance. This is where conditions and lists would be able to be really helpful, where you can actually then bring in the event registration and only show the information for, let's say, the most recent event that they attended or the last 3 that they attended. So it really does extend some of the possibilities, especially without having to go into the code, so that you're able to kind of traverse into those that have the one-to-many relationships. Feel free to jump in with any questions as I kind of go through these. The trigger-based journey communication. So let's go back to that example with the volunteer re-engagement. So in this example, let's say that the volunteers haven't participated in the last like 120 days, and that then changes their membership level in Dynamics to inactive. A couple of things. One, that change on the contact record can then be used to trigger into the journey. So whereas historically we would have had to use that in criteria for a segment, wait for the segment to be evaluated, and then if they met that criteria in the future, they would not necessarily be able to re-enter that journey. Triggers alleviates a lot of that headache. So you can use it to create or to trigger the initial series of communications. Then you can actually create that series, and that'll be what you see right here, where you'll have your emails and intervals that will allow you to then send that communication to start reigniting that engagement. Another call out here is around the channel optimization. So as I mentioned, you can start to leverage channels beyond email. So in this case, let's say it's email and SMS. We can actually use the channel optimization, add in both of those touch points or both versions of those touch points, and then we can suggest that if you don't have the information or if the system is unsure, we can set a default to only send to email, for example. There are goals associated with channel optimization. So in this case, I want to be able to ensure that a volunteer is going to be added or is going to register for an upcoming event. And so if that's so, then I ultimately can just set a goal that's based off of them, that event registration record being created. Finally, when we talk about goals and the effectiveness, we have the ability to kind of set those journey goals based off of a number of options. In this case, again, we're using the volunteer. So we're trying to increase loyalty, right? Getting them to continue to participate in these events. So we can use that trigger again. So the marketing event registration records are being created, and we can actually set a goal and say, look, I want my hope is that with this campaign, at least half of these folks are in fact going to register for an event. And that again just helps us better determine what's working, what's not, and then be able to apply those learnings to future marketing efforts. Questions on trigger-based orchestration? All right, consent management. So again, there's a lot to unpack here. I'm going to just give you kind of the high level, but Dynamics does have a more modern consent model or consent management process here. It does allow you to manage the end-to-end consent process from requesting to capturing to storing consent. Now, I will give one caveat. Double opt-in, which I know is important, particularly for Canadian markets, is not yet supported natively in real time. It is on the roadmap. Of course, I don't have an exact date, but it is not currently supported. Now, it just requires some additional legwork, so it's absolutely possible, but it's not something that's natively supported just yet. But there is a pretty robust consent management model within the system in real time today. There are, I think, a couple of call outs. First is around the contact point. So this is a major departure today. If you are using consent, it is based off bulk email and or email field on the contact record, and they are specifically tied to a given contact record. Real time uses this based off of contact point. So instead of it pointing to the specific contact record, it's going to look for the email address or phone number. Now, pro tip, if you have duplicates in your system, this is the time to perform a data hygiene exercise, because what this means is that if you have that same email address across multiple records and you send out communication and it's a, let's say, a non-restrictive model that allows you to send it out, it's going to send that communication to, let's say there's 3 records that have the same email address, it's going to send that email 3 times. So yeah, big pro tip there, as you, for those of you who are either going to start to move or begin to use CI journeys, that's a big call out there as it relates to consent. It is based off of contact point, not the contact record. There is a consent center and it is multi-channel. So as I mentioned before, now we're not just looking at consent as it relates to email, but you can actually manage or capture that consent related to SMS as well. So when you have your contact points, you will have those records either for email or for SMS. There are consent models that are applied throughout the system. So you have 2 options to select from: restrictive, non-restrictive, and then depending on the channel that you are using, that will determine how those models come into play. SMS, for example, if you have a commercial text message that's being sent out, you absolutely have to have consent, which means it runs along the more restrictive model. You do have a little bit of flexibility there, and you have different compliance centers that you can create that satisfy those. So again, if you are in Canada, but you have companies, you are doing business in the EU, you may need 2 different compliance centers for each of those regions. And within those compliance records, you're going to see the consent model, so restrictive versus non, whether or not to request tracking consent from customers, what the physical address is, and then ultimately what they're going to see on the preference center. So it traditionally in outbound, your subscription center flows into those subscription lists. And again, they are primarily focused on email. Now you're going to go beyond that with a different hierarchy, whereas in the compliance centers, you're going to have purposes, and those are, commercial, transactional, and then you'll have those topics, which are those different points of interest. That's how the consent model is being used. Again, more to come on that in an upcoming webinar on consent management and D365. But again, all of this really allows for just a more modern, more kind of flexible approach to consent management, as opposed to just having a one-size-fits-all. Finally, Copilot. Now, as I mentioned, still a work in progress, but you'll see here, for example, you're able to kind of build out at least the start of a segment. Now, I say a work in progress because, as you can see here, this is a pretty simple query. Once it starts to get more complex, there's definitely some refinement that you need, but it is a really good tool, especially for those who are getting used to the new segment builder, because it obviously looks very different from what you have in outbound. So it can actually be an inadvertent training tool a bit as well. But yeah, you're just kind of building those queries, and that's something that's available both on the journeys and the data side. You have that available in both areas. So you can see here where by creating that initial query, it's then using it to create the criteria that you can then refine however needed. So this is one example to create those audiences. Again, I also mentioned there's content ideas where you can put in a series of points or kind of talking points, if you will, and then the system will give you a few options on different types of content that you can put into the email. Again, it's a starting point. You'll want to then refine just to make sure that it's aligned with your brand. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about the transition from outbound to real time. So for those of you who are using the application today, if you have not already, there is a transition, and we use that term intentionally because it really is not a flip of the switch. I think folks who tried to do this really early on may have found that out the hard way. But we really do recommend a more hybrid approach. For those who take a self-service approach, definitely some pitfalls to consider. But regardless of whether you're doing it yourself or you're bringing in a partner like Coffee and Done, a few things just to consider as you start that transition. First is just making sure that you've got the right team members in the room. This is a great opportunity to take a step back and make sure that the processes that you have in place and the technology are actually supporting your business goals and not in part dictating them. And so this would mean your marketing, your sales, your IT, your legal, your compliance. This is an opportunity to make sure that you're getting it right. I mentioned before around audits for like your data and your marketing assets. So from the data perspective, if you've got duplicates, now's the time to clean that up. If you have phone numbers and you're looking to leverage SMS, you'll want to make sure that they're in the right format so that you can use them and that they're supported when you're sending out those journeys using SMS. From a marketing assets perspective, this is where you have your email templates, things that need to be migrated. So you'll want to determine what's available, what needs to be moved over or rebuilt. And there is a tool for I believe for the email templates, at least for now, that allow you to do that with a little bit more ease. But you'll just want to make sure that you're kind of clear, because the fact is 9 times out of 10, all of the forms that you have, you probably don't need anymore. Maybe it was a single event, or maybe it was something you built as a test, or for whatever reason, there's typically an opportunity to just avoid the kind of garbage in, garbage out approach and really just move over what you really need to leverage in real time. It's also a really good opportunity to start thinking about, and again, it's a little bit of a shift in mindset, but thinking about what you can create as a trigger as opposed to creating a segment. For those of you who have a lot of segments, I am sure the organizations have run into the segment limits. This definitely helps take away a lot of that. So by determining which of these can be used as triggers instead of journeys, there's a fair amount of efficiency there, because again, then you're avoiding having to recreate those journeys for those who need to re-enter it at any given time. And you're not having to worry about having too many segments in the system. The next one is around consent. So now's the time to see if you have the, how your consent is being captured, if you have consent captured, if there is potentially a re-permission campaign that maybe you need to do anyway to start getting ready, so that when it's time to load that consent into real time, you really have everything that you need to do so. The next is around training. So, I mentioned, it definitely requires a different discipline. And I think that's just the application as a whole. It's not just real time. But, any documentation, also training sessions for users can be really helpful. Maybe even in lower environments, just to help increase that tool confidence, because it is a different experience. I think what we have found with clients who have come to us after they've tried to start the transition on their own is that they'll start to see differences in the way that the email personalization works, or consent. Those are probably two big ones I can think of right off the bat. And so it definitely helps to just get a little more comfortable with that area of the system before you make the move. Final two around, first is the adoption plan. So again, it's not a flip of the switch. We typically will recommend that you give yourself anywhere from 2 to 3 months, and there may be opportunity to consolidate that. It just depends on a number of factors, but you want to give yourself some time to ensure you perform the exercises that we've mentioned. You're still taking the right approach. The system is still configured in a way that supports your process and business goals. But creating that plan to help you just determine what changes need to be made and how you make sure that you're communicating those changes to internal users can be really, really helpful. Otherwise, you're starting to run into, inconsistency in system adoption and or lack thereof, because anytime something is new, it definitely has a learning curve, and therefore that can certainly risk your system adoption. And then finally, it's shameless plug, find the right consulting partner. You got to find one that is, feels good about and well-versed in customer insights, journeys, and data to make sure you're covering these and all your other bases. So that's where Coffee and Done comes in. We do have an approach where we have, again, this kind of base CE engagement package that allows you to just take advantage of the core marketing opportunity. So if this is brand new for you, this really gives you just an opportunity to stand the product up, just get the core marketing down, and then depending on your business goals, you can choose any one of the accelerators. So whether it is increasing, you're looking to increase leads, you're looking to increase either volume or velocity, if you are looking to increase loyalty or cross-sell or improve retention. We've created these accelerators that include, features between both journeys and data that help you reach those goals. And then we have some additional add-ons, of course, around things like ABM if you're taking a more traditional B2B approach, and some additional reporting. Because again, as good as the reporting is becoming within Dynamics, there's still a lot of opportunity to be able to leverage it and aggregate within things like Power BI. So those custom dashboards, things like that, so that you really make sure you're making data-driven decisions. All right, I've gone on long enough. So we've got a lot of really great content on CI journeys and some of the product adjacent stuff around just getting your marketing and sales teams prepared and organized and aligned. How to send out the right campaigns. A lot of that is available on our blog, so please take a look at coffee-done.com/blog. Check out Contact Us for more information. And if you are looking for a marketing partner, please reach out, info@coffee-done.com. Woo! All right, what questions can I answer for you?
There's a lot. Thank you so much. So first of all, thank you so much. That was a great overview of just all the things, and it's a lot. You know, your first slide where you were like, "Hey, let's look at the trajectory of this platform." It's dizzying, not because of the design on your slide, just because of how Microsoft's gone about it. But does feel like they're definitely making some strong headway now, which is awesome. There's a number of questions in the chat, some of which have been responded to. I am by no means a marketing expert. I leave that to other people on our team here. So I don't have answers. I don't know if anybody else does, but might be worth kind of looking through some of those.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have any questions or items that they want to talk about or ask?
Like Caroline, thank you, Caroline, for jumping in on several of these. Caroline is one of our consulting managers at Coffee and Done. So thanks for pinch hitting there. Just to connect on how other individuals house multiple companies. Yes, absolutely. Would love to see if there's a way to tie the consent model to the contact location. Yeah. This is actually one that we are addressing today with a client. I think we definitely want to hear more information about this and maybe better understand your use case. But yes, happy to talk about some of the work that we're doing with another client on this today. What other questions can I answer for you? Did I give you a mouthful already? Did I answer everything?
It's for the Schwab group all along, so yeah, you may not have it. But now's the time if anybody does have some. No? If you're talking, you're on mute.
Yes.
Okay, well, you did put the contact information up there, so I'm sure if people have questions and want to follow up, I know a few people who were pretty engaged had to step out for other commitments, so totally understand that. So that then would bring us to a close for today's session. So first and foremost, thank you so much, Susana. Great session, excellent overview. Agree, thank you, Caroline, for chiming in and answering some of those questions, because I was looking at them with wide eyes, like, I don't know what to say, so I'm not gonna say anything, which as Liz knows is rare that I don't have anything to say. So I thank you, Liz, for all the overview on Doug events, and look forward to our next one. Again, date still up in the air a little bit, but we're looking around the August, not August, that's last month, October 12th for the next one, where we'll dive into some of the Power Platform Copilot features, what's kind of cool, what's coming, and what's available. So thank you, everybody, for your time today. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon and have a great weekend. We'll see you again soon.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.